Shukran. That's the end of the Arabic part. So this is an appropriate day for us to gather, being Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. It's a day of remembrance. The word chosen to symbolize the Holocaust was not avenge or revenge. It was zachor, remember. Because remembrance enables us to learn the lessons of the past. It enables us to spare future generations these trials and tribulations, that we look back by studying the history of the Jews in the Arab world, by we looking back to our common roots, enables us to look forward. Winston Churchill once said that the further back you look, the further ahead you will see. Our sages instructed us in this 1,000 years ago that our holidays, our observances, enable us to look back, to look at the roots, to look at where we came from in order to know where we are going. And we see it in the Bible very often that we're not told, our forefathers and foremothers weren't told where they were going. First, they had to know where they were coming from. And so we look back, not to get lost in history, but to be inspired by it, to be guided by it, and to learn the lessons so that we can prepare for the future properly. The greatest danger we face today is indifference, is when people don't care because the haters, the bigots, the racists, the anti-Semites take advantage of it. They look for the vacuum that is created when people are ignorant and indifferent. Moses taught us that that is the greatest danger, even greater than external enemies, is when we are not alert to the dangers and don't respond to them. We do not want to be tolerated. We want to see mutual respect. Tolerance means that they just put up with each other. We want to have people respect one another, to understand who we are and what each of us brings to the table. The beauty of each of our different backgrounds together creates a beautiful quilt. When pitted against one another, it's destruction for all. So this is a time when we do look back to discover the mistakes of the past of 80 years ago, the silence of the world, and we pledge that never again we will not allow it to happen. And we're not going to say it must stop. As Jason rightly said, the message is it will stop now, that it must stop now. It is not something that we are putting off or as a goal of the future. But with the leadership of the Sheikh, with the others in the Jewish community, with all of us coming together, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, everybody, because we all have an equal stake in this. None of us is immune from the consequences of hatred and bigotry allowed to go unchallenged. So this is a time, especially in this age of globalization, where everything is interrelated. You can no longer separate what happens in one country from what happens everywhere else. The cancer metastasizes and affects everyone. So we need to mobilize, to bring everyone together, to say that we will work together, that we will make these joint efforts the standard so that we can look at our grandchildren and their grandchildren and say, we rose to the occasion. We were not silent. The haters will not go unchallenged anymore. I don't want any more memorials. I don't want any more Holocaust tributes. I want the world to stand up for living Jews in a living Jewish state. I want the world to stand up against hatred and not to tell us how sorry they are afterwards. We've had enough of the crocodile tears. It's a time when we have to stand up and demand that everyone, elected officials, religious leaders, entertainment figures, all influentials, will rise to the occasion and say, it stops now. I want to ask Mr. Weinberger, could I have the book? I want to present, this is 2 volumes. Come on. This is a book, 2 books, that we published of the synagogues that were destroyed on Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1938. The history book said that 195 or 225 synagogues were destroyed because the Nazis put out the numbers, and they called it Kristallnacht to denude it of its significance. We call it Pogrom Night, the night of the pogrom, because tens of thousands of Jews were arrested, many people were killed, and countless businesses were destroyed. And that was the beginning of the end, although it had started earlier. And in this, we documented, after a 10-year study, over 1,700 synagogues that were destroyed just in Germany on that night, in the areas under German control. There's a separate book on Austria, there's separate on other areas. But to understand the magnitude, so that all of those who said they didn't know, it was a lie. This was organized, it took months and even longer to do. So it wasn't that they didn't know, they didn't want to know. Today we know. And by coming together, we can stand against it so that in 70 years, people will look back and they will say, they learned the lesson of never again. They stood up, they spoke out, they acted, and they put the haters to shame. And by doing it now, it will stop now. Thank you.